Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on sibling rights for youth in foster care. This was my chosen passion that I researched and studied this semester. So just a little bit of background about child welfare and this passion. So the child welfare system in Kentucky, their mission statement or vision aims to promote self-sufficiency and permanency for youth in foster care. And so for some, that looks like long-term foster care placements, adoption for most of them, or reunification with their biological families. So going into the statistics of sibling rights and siblings in foster care and foster care in general. As of September 5th, 2021, there are a little over 9,000 children placed in out-of-home care in Kentucky. And 50% of those children have a permanency goal of reunification. So when we see reunification as a permanency goal, we're typically referring to their return to parent situation. So we oftentimes ignore the fact that these individuals have been separated from their siblings while they've been in foster care, and they do not return to parent with them, or they're not reunited in other situations such as adoption or aging out of the system. So why is it that we have not placed more of an emphasis as on siblings as a part of permanency for children in foster care? Permanency does not always need to be defined in the parental placement point of view or your home placement point of view. Siblings are often a form of relational permanency for individuals in foster care, and 2/3 of children in foster care are part of a sibling group, and more than 70% of those have been separated. So there are newer policies in place to help siblings stay connected when they're separated, but unfortunately, those policies are not doing what they need to do. So now we're going to talk about my connection to this passion and why I've chosen it and why it's important. This passion of providing sibling rights to sibling groups in foster care and allowing them to maintain contact with their siblings is very dear to my heart because I'm a foster alumni and I've been a child welfare advocate for about 3 years now, and I continue to work in advocacy and policy throughout the rest of my career. And as someone who was not provided permanency within the system that I left and grew up in, I've been a strong advocate for better services that can help equip children in foster care with those skills, opportunities, and supports that they need to strengthen their relational permanency. And many of them leave the system without those skills and support, which concludes that more child welfare policy and practice needs to be shaped around providing that relational permanency. So assisting youth in foster care with more rights to maintain their sibling relationships is one of the most obvious places to start. So when we're talking about the profession of social work, I've examined the viewpoints and standpoints that they have, which are listed here for you guys. So every young person needs relational permanence, which can come in the form of relatives, including siblings. The NASW has a supportive platform for youth in foster care to maintain relational permanency. They support permanency for children in foster care and keeping siblings together. And when siblings are separated, the NASW supports keeping those connections between them. And the NASW also supports the promotion of emotional and relational permanency as an intentional casework activity for those frontline workers. So now we're going to talk about the code of ethics for social workers. So the passion of advocating for sibling rights for youth in foster care or for those youth who are adopted from foster care aligns with many of the ethical principles in the NASW Code of Ethics. These individuals are part of a vulnerable population that need assistance. So it especially pertains to relational permanency as it relates to siblings and other individuals in their lives, and thus social workers have been called to serve them. That is the serve portion of our values. Social workers are also called to challenge social injustices, and allowing children in foster care or those who are adopted from state custody to lose contact with their siblings is an injustice to the well-being of their population. So in respecting dignity and worth of the person, which is one of the social work values, social workers should aim to resolve conflicts between client interests and societal interests. So policymakers and child welfare personnel have not seen this issue as pressing enough, and there's clearly a discrepancy between the professional decision and policymaking for this population and their own interests. Social workers are called to alleviate this issue. And one of the most important ethical principles that related to this passion is recognizing the importance of human relationships. Social workers engage in the process of strengthening those relationships between clients and people and communities that surround them. This includes advocating for all relational permanence options for youth in foster care or who were adopted, including and especially their siblings. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the opposing viewpoints to my passion. So as child welfare is typically a bipartisan realm within politics, there's normally not too much argument among policymakers regarding relations to foster care. However, with this topic, there are more positions that support giving children, including siblings, their own rights, but there are also those who oppose. And the opposition involves questions around how to enforce children's rights and what type of power dynamic that would create between parents and children and minors, individuals who are under 18. So when we're talking about this passion or any passion in general, we always want to discuss its intersectionality with other arenas, so that, you know, if we're dipping into one thing, we may be touching on another, and we need to address that and address it all, so that when you're putting this together, it's like putting each piece of the puzzle together. So when you're discussing intersectionality for sibling rights for youth in foster care, we always want to make sure that intersectionality among institutional racism is always and also being addressed when discussing prominent issues within the child welfare system. And this is because you can see that there is a large disproportion of African Americans or minorities, other minority groups in the child welfare system, and oftentimes a lot of them are sibling groups. So when we're discussing sibling rights, are we looking at, is it the African American or Latino or Native American communities? Are those sibling groups separated more? Are they not allowed to have contact more? So should we be looking at that more in depth as to why that, you know, those particular populations of sibling groups are facing these issues, and what can we do to specifically address that as well? So the policy that I have chosen for my project is the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. It was passed in April of 2019, formerly known as House Bill 158 when it was in legislation. So this bill was passed by Governor Bevin in the 2019 session. And the Bill of Rights aims to create a piece of legislation that states the rights for each individual who is currently residing in foster care in the state of Kentucky. So this bill was created by DCBS and the legislature in partnership with the Voices of the Commonwealth Youth Leadership Council. And some of the rights can include things such as a right to safe environment, right to participate in court hearings, and a right to stay at the same school, even during placement change when at all possible. So these are not all of the rights, of course. It is a very long document, and I encourage all of you to go look at it. But there are several rights for youth in foster care in there. So the bill aimed to not only state their rights, but to empower them with a document that they can use to advocate for themselves. And so over the past 2 years, this document has been looked at and analyzed, and it seems to be missing some essential information according to foster youth feedback from the state of Kentucky. So here's some new amendments. So this picture that you see here is actually a new bill. It is the Bill of Rights, the Foster Youth Bill of Rights, but it has new amendments in it. And you can see number 9 and number 12. And number 12 is where it really captures my passion, or at least a small portion of it, by allowing siblings to participate in court hearings if deemed appropriate by the cabinet. And so I worked with the Voices of the Commonwealth. I actually served on the VOC and started this project when I was on their council, but I have since moved off, and I have been working with them since then to make amendments to this policy and hopefully propose it as a new bill for the 2022 legislative session. So what can this policy do for sibling rights? This bill could easily help address the passion for sibling rights in foster care by adding language that allows siblings to maintain contact while in state's custody and participate in each other's court proceedings. So to talk about some of the consequences or populations that would be affected by the changes to this policy, foster parents would not be allowed to sever contact between siblings in foster care and would not have a say in whether they can participate in their siblings' court hearings because that right would now be given to the child. These policy changes will affect foster parents by decreasing some of their parental rights, and this policy will affect frontline social work staff who work on foster care cases by mandating them to make sure that siblings are participating in each other's court hearings. The same effect would occur for guardian ad litems. And this policy would also affect foster youth who are siblings currently in state's custody by allowing them to feel more connected to their siblings and involved in case planning. Foster and adoptive parents may oppose this policy as they might feel that their parental rights would be threatened. So here's some policy recommendations that we came up with. Obviously, one of these is not in there, and I will talk a little bit about why that is. But we recommended to pass this policy with an amendment to allow siblings to maintain contact even after adoption or separation in different foster homes, and the amendment that you guys saw, which was to allow siblings to participate in court proceedings. So the first amendment that is stated there, allowing them to maintain contact even after adoption, was in the original bill, but after we had gotten some feedback from different organizations that would be involved in the enforcement of the bill, we had to take that out because we're still trying to navigate how the enforcement of that would occur after adoption occurs. Because after adoption occurs, the cabinet has no say in what the parents decide to do. So it's hard to enforce an adoptive parent who already has a closed case to allow sibling contact between siblings in separated homes or different placements. So we're still navigating that issue right now. So who's that champion? So the champion that I am recommending to the organization who is proposing this bill with me is Julie Rack Adams. So she has been serving in the Kentucky Senate since 2016 in the 36th district. She has been involved in politics since 2003 when she served on the Louisville Metro Council. And she got involved in policy work because she petitioned for a stop sign on her street to help school children's safety, and she felt that her concerns went unheard. She ran unopposed in 2002 and served on the Louisville Metro Council from 2003 until 2009. And then she ran for the Kentucky House of Representatives and served as representative from 2011 to 2015 under Governor Bevin. And now she serves under Beshear since 2016. Since that change occurred a couple of years ago in the middle. She also holds a BA and MA degree, and her campaign platform revolved mostly around taxation and being fiscally aware. She's also a member of the Republican Party. She currently serves on several Senate committees, and holds co-chair of the Child Health and Welfare Advisory and Oversight Committee. And so that is why I think she would be a great champion for this bill. So some more recommendations. Senator Adam has sponsored many bills regarding child welfare before, such as recent changes to the foster and adopted tuition waiver policy that was passed in April of 2020, which I actually drafted that bill and helped move that into legislation. So that's very exciting. And my recommendations also are that when proposing the amendments to this policy, the Voices of the Commonwealth organization that I've been working closely with should utilize Senator Adams' position within the committee that she serves on and her position as Senate Majority Party and her previous sponsorship of our last bill as a boost to using her as a champion for this bill. So I've been mentioning a lot Voices of the Commonwealth, VOC. So I'm going to tell you guys what it is because they were the organization that I chose for my project. So the VOC is comprised of individuals who are currently experiencing foster care or who formerly experienced foster care from the ages of 16 to 24 in the state of Kentucky. And these individuals become young advocates who utilize their lived experience to advocate for positive changes in child welfare policy. They have previously passed the driver's license bill, the new tuition waiver, the Foster Youth Bill of Rights, and are looking at 2 new pieces of legislation for this year. They're also key assets in opposing child welfare legislation that could be harmful to current youth in out-of-home care. So my connection with this agency, as I stated before, I worked as a chairperson and a member of the VOC for 3 years. So that was my connection to the VOC. And I worked with the current chairperson and co-chair of the VOC who supported this policy idea. And they were very passionate about the same ideals because they have similar stories with being part of a sibling group in foster care. So they had same ideals regarding for the sibling rights of youth in foster and adoptive care. And then the themes of our discussion included sibling contact for youth in separate homes while still being in state's custody, contact for siblings who have been separated but adopted into different homes, and how to enforce that kind of policy, and then what kind of opposition would we get. The VOC gave suggestions for policymakers who could be a champion for the bill, and one of those was Senator Adams. So to conclude this, what I have learned throughout this whole thing is that throughout this process, adults do not like to give rights to children and do not support giving children rights if it means taking away from their own, which is unfortunate. I have also learned that policy changes also oftentimes mean nothing if not enforced correctly. So there may be policies out there that we don't know about because they're not being enforced or they're not being made publicly aware of. So getting the word out there about policy changes is very important. So for example, the tuition waiver changes, we really had to network with the colleges and get the word out there that there had been changes to that legislation so they can now be implemented for individuals who are trying to go to college or a trade school or things like that. And so next steps for the VOC and this policy would be getting this bill sponsored so that it can move through legislation during the 2022 session. And then for myself, considering that my career goal is to work within the policy arena, whether as an analyst or lobbyist or policymaker, is to continue to demand for the involvement of these populations who we're making decisions and policies about. And so as the current commissioner of DCBS says, which I love, nothing about us without us. So lastly, I want to talk about the social worker role a little bit. Social workers must ensure that siblings are involved in each other's case planning, even if they are separated. And social workers must ensure that there is still contact and must start the conversation and support the conversation of sibling contact post-adoption.